On a quiet Tuesday morning, Walt Jennings found a bright pink notice tucked beneath his windshield wiper, as if summer had decided to play a bureaucratic prank. He stood in the rising heat of June, the morning sun glinting off the hood of his Buick, squinting at the neatly printed violation. His driveway, edged with low shrubs and a carefully maintained strip of gravel, had cradled that car for over a decade. Walt adjusted his glasses, tilted the paper toward the light, and read the bold, bureaucratic ink, $120, violation, unauthorized overnight parking, HOA Code 4.2.1. Well, he muttered, that's new. He walked back into his single-story brick home, the screen door creaking gently behind him. The house smelled of brewed coffee and lemon floor polish. He had mopped last night out of habit, not necessity. On the kitchen counter, the morning paper was folded next to a slice of leftover cornbread. Walt dropped the pink slip beside it, poured himself a mug of black coffee from the percolator, and sat down with a quiet huff. His calendar, posted neatly on the fridge, confirmed what he already knew: Tuesday, June 13th. The car hadn't moved since Sunday afternoon. 2 nights. He took a sip, scowling at the bitterness, and glanced toward the living room where the HOA welcome packet had lived untouched for 6 years. Instead of opening that right away, he grabbed his keys and headed out. Edna's diner was half full, as it usually was around 8:30 a.m. The same jingling bell rang when he opened the door, the same worn vinyl booths lined the windows, and the same laminated menus sat tucked behind napkin dispensers. Gerald, the retired postman, sat in his usual spot nursing eggs and black coffee. Doreen the waitress barely looked up before pointing to the booth across from Gerald. Walt slid in, placing the pink paper on the table between them. Doreen poured him coffee without asking. Your usual, hon? Walt nodded. Thanks. Gerald leaned forward. Well, I'll be. You got one too? Walt lifted an eyebrow. 2? Gerald chuckled, lowering his voice. HOA's been on a roll since Carla Mitchum took the reins. You know her, right? Corner house. White shutters, overly trimmed hedges. Moved in last fall. Walt's brow furrowed. We've never even met. She had the Jacksons repaint their fence 3 shades lighter. Called it tone disruptive. He chuckled again. Watch out, Walt, Maple Loop's got a new sheriff in town. Walt sipped his coffee slowly. It was hot and strong, and a refill always came without asking. That, at least, hadn't changed. He left a $1.50 tip under the saucer and drove home, eyes narrowing as he passed 2 other homes with sedans parked in driveways. No pink slips in sight. Back home, he pulled open a rarely used file cabinet in the hallway. After some rummaging, he found it, the HOA handbook, still in its original plastic sleeve. He sat at the kitchen table, thumbing through the pages until he found section 4.2.1. Vehicles may not be parked in driveways overnight for more than 2 consecutive days without prior written consent from the HOA board. Technically, he had violated it. Technically. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Jennings? The voice on the other end was smooth, rehearsed. Yes. This is Carla Mitchum, president of the Maple Loop HOA. I wanted to ensure you received the citation this morning regarding your parked vehicle. I did, Walt said evenly. Excellent. As stated in our handbook, prolonged driveway parking without permission disrupts neighborhood flow and appearance. I'm sure you understand. I wasn't aware this was an issue. The handbook outlines all guidelines. We trust residents will stay informed. Her tone didn't rise or fall. It was the voice of someone who had practiced the same sentence too many times. She hung up before he could reply. Walt sat for a long moment, then picked up the handbook again. The font was small, cramped. Somewhere on the cover, the HOA's motto was printed in faded gold, harmony through order. That evening, after mowing his lawn and recoiling the garden hose, Walt sat out front in his canvas chair, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. Sprinklers clicked on in synchronized rows. The Garcias little boy zipped by on his scooter. Overhead, pink clouds stretched across the Arizona sky. It was the kind of evening his wife had always loved. He missed her in moments like this, quiet, where she'd hum to herself while deadheading flowers. She would have found this HOA nonsense absurd. He could almost hear her laughing at the absurdity of it all. When the last of the sun dipped below the rooftops, he went inside, reheated some stew, and finished the crossword. Later, as he flipped through the HOA's digital platform, mostly cat photos and lost keys, he found a post that stopped him cold. There it was, a photo of his Buick, taken from across the street. The same angle he'd parked in every week. The caption above read, "Rules apply to everyone." Posted by Carla Mitchum. The comments below ranged from confused to cheerfully officious. He didn't reply. He didn't click anything. He simply closed the laptop and walked to the bookshelf. There, in a box labeled Home Purchase, 2017, he found the original HOA agreement, still paper-clipped and annotated in his wife's handwriting. He brought it into the guest room, where Mia was sprawled on the bed with her laptop, earbuds in. She looked up, pulling one earbud out. He said nothing at first. Then, quietly, with a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, he held up the thick packet of papers. "Let's see what else the rulebook says." By Friday, Walt's mailbox held 3 more pink citations. His lawn was 0.3 inches too long, the wind chime too melodic, and the mailbox slightly blue-gray instead of HOA-approved beige. He held the papers like a stack of overdue bills from a parallel universe. The wind chime had hung there since 1994, a gift from his late wife. It made a soft, lazy clinking sound only when the wind cooperated, which, in Flagstaff, wasn't often. As for the lawn, he'd trimmed it just 3 days ago with the same mower he'd used since retirement. And the mailbox? He tilted his head. It looked beige enough to him. Mia peeked over his shoulder. "Suburban war by pastel paperwork," she muttered, reaching for the coffee pot. Walt sighed, setting the slips beside his coffee mug. The HOA's latest newsletter, printed in flowing papyrus font, was spread out on the counter. He read the headline aloud, "Upholding Harmony Through Compliance." Underneath, a cartoon sun smiled over 3 identical beige houses. "You ever heard of a font starting a revolution?" he asked. "Just one," Mia replied, sipping coffee. "And here we are." By mid-morning, Walt's garage had transformed into something between a war room and a librarian's dream. Mia had pulled out her laptop, a notepad, 2 legal pads, and a dozen highlighters. Walt had unearthed a banker's box full of HOA correspondence dating back to their move-in year. Outside, the heat pressed gently against the house, and a cicada buzzed at the window like a faulty doorbell. Walt leaned against the workbench, squinting down at a scanned PDF of the HOA architectural guidelines. "Page 14 says decorative items need board approval," Mia noted. "That includes wind chimes, apparently." He rubbed his forehead. "Since when does a chime need a vote?" "At least since Carla," Mia replied. "But get this, zoning maps for this subdivision are public." They dove into the city's online portal, tracking lot boundaries and development phases. It took time, but eventually Mia pulled up something strange. "Your lot," she said, "is part of the original block, Maple Loop Phase 1. HOA control didn't expand officially to Phase 1 until after the 2018 amendment." He raised an eyebrow. "We moved here in 2017. They looked at each other. Walt reached for the original property folder and found the deed, creased but legible, with plat maps and notarized signatures. He tucked it under his arm. "Let's take a walk." Out on the sidewalk, neighbors were beginning their morning routines. Sprinklers arched in synchronized rhythm across front yards. Mrs. Lorna Bell sat on her porch with a glass of iced tea and a paperback mystery. "Morning, Lorna," Walt called out. She waved them over. "Walt Jennings. Come sit. You too, young one." Mia smiled and perched on the steps. "I got one of those silly slips too," Lorna said, tapping a stack of pink papers on the side table. "Apparently my sun catchers are reflectively disruptive." She rolled her eyes. They've been there 15 years. Caught more compliments than birds. Walt chuckled. Did you ever get warned about them before? Not until Carla got elected president. Now every Tuesday feels like Judgment Day. Mia leaned forward. Has anyone else talked about this? Complained, maybe? Lorna shrugged. Oh, everyone's grumbling. No one wants to be the first to poke the bear. But me? I'm tired of being polite. They chatted a bit longer before heading down the sidewalk. Near the Mitchum's house, Walt spotted Elias trimming the front hedges. The young man looked up, hesitated, and gave a short nod. Morning, Walt said. Hi, Mr. Jennings. There was a pause, filled with the hum of the hedge trimmer and a bird chirping somewhere nearby. I saw the citations, Elias said finally. I just wanted to say sorry. Walt tilted his head. You're not the one handing them out. No, but, Elias looked away. I helped print them. Mia blinked. Seriously? Elias nodded, voice low. Mom asked me to help with layout and delivery. Said it was a family project. But it doesn't feel right. Walt stepped closer. Then why keep doing it? Elias hesitated again. I guess. I'm just trying not to make things worse. He didn't say more, and they didn't press. But when they left, Walt noticed Elias staring down at the hedge trimmer like it was a confession in plastic. Back at home, Walt pulled out the deed again. He traced the lot boundaries, then overlaid them on the digital map Mia had printed. This line right here, he said, pointing. It never overlaps with the HOA expansion boundaries. Which means? Walt flipped the paper over, searching for the notarized date. Which means, he said slowly, they never legally assumed governance over this property. My driveway? It's not theirs. Mia leaned back, blinking. Are you serious? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the front window and held the deed up to the sunlight filtering through the curtains. The thin paper glowed gold around the edges. He studied it as if it were a blueprint to a hidden escape hatch. Walt leaned back, holding the paper up to the window light. If they don't control it, then I just might. Walt stood before a city clerk and asked, can a citizen donate a driveway to the people? The question hung in the air like a fly trapped in a sunbeam. The clerk, a woman in her early 30s with smart glasses and a badge that read Maya, blinked twice before slowly setting down her pen. Her desk was cluttered in the charming, lived-in way of most public offices, paper trays stacked haphazardly, a cactus in a coffee mug, and a calendar turned 1 month too late. You mean, she said carefully, you want to voluntarily convert your private driveway into a public easement? Walt gave a slow nod. For pedestrian and city vehicle use, sure. I'll even shovel it in winter. Maya studied him, lips twitching slightly. You know, in 12 years here, no one's ever walked in asking that. I figured. He smiled mildly. But I've always liked a good process. She leaned back, tapping her keyboard. It's not impossible. There's a form for it. Several, in fact. It'll require zoning verification, planning review, a site inspection, and probably a hearing. How long? Depends. Anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. But we can start the clock today if you like. Walt nodded. Let's start the clock. The paperwork was delightfully analog. Walt filled most of it out by hand at the counter, using one of those retractable pens chained to a metal base. Maya found a rotary stapler behind her desk, clearly vintage, and fastened the first section together with a satisfying ka-thunk. He walked out holding a thin folder and a half-smile. Back home, the kitchen had become more command post than culinary space. Mia had spread zoning maps across the counter, a city planning FAQ tab open on her laptop. Walt's thermos sat beside her, battered and stickered with faded logos from engineering firms he hadn't worked with in 20 years. Let me guess, she said. You did it. Clock's ticking, he replied. She slid a legal pad toward him. Then let's build a timeline. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of documents, online requests, and unexpected support. Mr. Tate stopped by with rolled-up neighborhood plats from 2004. They smelled like dust and toner. You can see here, he said, pointing with a pencil, the HOA's boundary line never extended past Maple Loop's first cul-de-sac. Technically, you're standing on your own sovereign driveway. Walt grinned. Then let's raise a flag. He and Mia drafted the official request package, zoning plat overlays, deed copies, tax lot verification. Mia logged every action into a spreadsheet labeled Driveway Uprising, Phase 1. Walt made the coffee. She made the jokes. Next thing you know, she quipped, you'll be chaining yourself to the mailbox. No need. I'm arming myself with a clipboard. By the evening of June 20th, they had triple-checked the package and sent it to the planning office. Maya confirmed receipt within an hour. I flagged this for review, her email read. Inspection scheduling to follow. That same night, as the sun melted into sherbet streaks over Maple Loop, Walt walked down the sidewalk with a wooden stake and a laminated sign. The neighbors' sprinklers hissed like soft applause. He stopped at the edge of his driveway, hammer in hand. The sign read, City Review Pending, Driveway Access, in blocky black font. Beneath it, in smaller type, per application to Flagstaff Municipal Planning, June 20, 2023. He pounded the stake into the soil with quiet satisfaction. The tap-tap-tap of the mallet was oddly cathartic. Across the street, Carla stood motionless on her porch. She wore a sleeveless blouse and crisp capris, arms folded tightly across her chest. No clipboard. No smile. Walt didn't wave. He didn't need to. She knew. As Walt placed the notice stake into his yard, Carla watched from her porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The HOA bulletin board featured a new poster, Civic Order is at Risk, Stop the Driveway Defiance. Walt stood before it on a Thursday morning, coffee in hand, sunlight warming the back of his neck. The poster was printed in glaring red capital letters and taped crookedly over a flyer for the annual block bake sale. In the corner, beneath the bold message, the signature read, HOA President, Keith Mitchum. It was accompanied by a grainy clipart of a gavel. Next to him, Mia raised an eyebrow. They act like you're breaking the Constitution, not sharing concrete. Walt sipped his coffee, then folded the poster up neatly and placed it in his folder of documentation. Just archiving, he muttered. At home, the garage had fully evolved into mission control. A folding table now held an old printer, several binders, Mia's laptop, and 2 corkboards covered in color-coded post-it notes. Walt had even dug out his vintage ham radio set and placed it reverently near the back wall for Sunday breaks. That morning's mail brought 2 new citations. One accused him of general disruption. The other cited lawn distracting to cohesion. Walt read the second one twice, then looked at Mia. What does that even mean? She leaned over, snapping a photo of the paper with her phone. It means Carla's running out of rules to twist. They documented it all. Mia added the entries to the spreadsheet now titled Violation Log, Maple Loop. Columns included, date, type, alleged infraction, house number, repeat. By noon, Mr. Tate dropped by holding a folder under one arm and 2 lemonades under the other. Thought you might like something cold, he said, handing one to Mia. And something hot, he added, passing the folder to Walt. Inside were annotated notes on HOA bylaw enforcement history, most of it dry legalese, but some highlighted passages raised eyebrows. There were no clear thresholds for issuing citations. Enforcement had become discretionary. Discretion, Tate said, is fine, until it's weaponized. That afternoon, Walt and Mia visited Mrs. Bell. Her front porch was shaded, the air cooler. She wore a broad straw hat and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I've got a stack of these now, she said, gesturing to a pile of pink slips beside her rocking chair. One said my porch swing exceeded motion expectations. I swear, Walt, they're making things up as they go. They sat with her a while. Walt took notes, Mia recorded voice memos. Lorna told stories from the HOA's early days, when meetings were potlucks and enforcement meant politely asking someone to trim their roses. People used to be neighborly, she said. Now they just hide behind paper. Back at home, as evening settled in, Walt drafted a formal request for financial transparency under HOA Policy 3.9.4. Mia proofread it, printed 2 copies, and Walt signed both with his favorite fountain pen. They slid one into an envelope addressed to the HOA board and walked it down to the submission slot at the community center. As they returned home, Carla's SUV, known throughout the neighborhood as the Civic Sentinel, rolled slowly past. She didn't stop. Just a flicker of sunglasses in the window and the low hum of tires on pavement. Later that night, Walt sat out front, radio tuned low, static humming like cicadas. He spotted Elias on the Mitchum porch, arms folded, listening while Carla spoke. Her tone was clipped, sharp. Elias shook his head once, then again. The exchange wasn't loud, but the body language told a story: tension, resistance, a line being drawn. When Walt finally went inside, the neighborhood was still. But sometime after midnight, Mia woke to a flicker through the blinds. She tiptoed to the window and whispered, "Uncle Walt." He joined her silently. Out front, Carla stood in her crisp workout clothes, crouching near the lawn with her phone held low. The flash lit up the hedges. She took one photo, then another, then whispered into her Bluetooth headset. "He's escalating," she said to whoever was on the other end. And then she was gone. Mrs. Bell invites Walt and neighbors for tea, her table stacked with pink violation slips like poker chips. Her front porch had always been one of the shadiest spots on Maple Loop, shielded by the wide arms of a sycamore tree older than the subdivision itself. This afternoon, folding chairs circled a table draped in faded floral cloth, with pitchers of iced sweet tea, mismatched glasses, and a large plate of peach cobbler that steamed faintly despite the summer heat. Walt arrived first, greeted by the gentle creak of the porch swing and Lorna Bell's warm, no-nonsense smile. "Thought we'd try something different than arguing in the garage," she said, nudging a tin of lemon cookies toward him. One by one, they trickled in. Mr. Tate with his usual clipboard. Gerald, bearing 2 plastic fans and wearing his "I survived the HOA board 2003 to 2005" cap. Jenny and Paul, the newlyweds from 2 houses down, clutched each other's hands like school kids at their first PTA meeting. Stacked in the center of the table were at least 20 pink violation slips, curling slightly at the corners in the afternoon breeze. Gerald leaned over them, squinting. "We should hold a raffle for who got the weirdest fine," he said, pulling one toward him. "My bet's on improper birdsong decibel level." Jenny gave a nervous laugh. "We got cited for putting up a welcome mat with a pineapple on it. Said it was non-compliant with regional motifs." Gerald whistled low. "I stand corrected." Walt sipped his tea, cool and sweet, and opened a manila folder. Inside was Mia's meticulously logged spreadsheet, printed and annotated with yellow highlighter. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, sliding it to the center of the table. Mr. Tate adjusted his glasses. "What am I looking at?" "Every citation issued on our block in the past 6 weeks. Our 6 houses have received nearly 80% of all fines in Maple Loop." He tapped a total at the bottom. "That's over $2,300. And there's no explanation. No hearing. Just paperwork." Paul cleared his throat. "We got a note last week. Not a citation, just a warning that if we didn't address our continuing violations, the HOA would begin foreclosure review procedures." He swallowed hard. "We didn't even know that was possible." "It is," Lorna said grimly. "If the fines keep stacking and go unpaid." Jenny's eyes filled. "We just moved in." Gerald laid a hand on the table. "You're not alone. That's why we're here." Mia arrived halfway through, waving a printed draft of a petition. "This isn't a lawsuit. It's a request for an independent audit under HOA Bylaw 5.2.3. Walt smiled. "It asks for transparency. That's all." They passed the pages around. One by one, neighbors leaned in and signed. Mr. Tate added his with an engineer's precision. Gerald used his red pen. Jenny and Paul signed side by side. 15 signatures in total. Walt looked at them, then at the faces around him, resolute, tired, hopeful. Mrs. Bell brought out a second cobbler. That evening, as the golden hour stretched across the loop, Walt put on his best Sunday hat, brown felt, with a small feather tucked into the band, and carried the petition in a navy folder. He walked slowly to the community bulletin board by the rec center. The cork was cluttered with notices, lost cat, piano lessons, and the infamous civic order poster from earlier that week. He pinned the petition over it with 3 brass tacks. Behind him, a screen door creaked. Carla stood across the street, arms folded, expression unreadable. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He turned and walked home as flag bunting rustled above in the breeze, already strung along several porches in anticipation of the 4th. Walt stood in his kitchen, pouring the last of the tea into a glass. Mia was tapping away at her laptop, updating the violation log, humming softly under her breath. Then came a knock at the door, quick, 3 beats, then silence. Walt opened it. Elias stood on the stoop, eyes darting left and right. In his hand was a sealed envelope. "You didn't get this from me," he said, and pressed it into Walt's palm. 3 city inspectors in khaki and clipboards arrive on Maple Loop, right as Carla finishes raking her perfect front yard. The sun was high, baking the pavement and casting sharp-edged shadows from mailbox posts and garden flags. Walt stood on his porch in a wide-brimmed straw hat, arms folded, watching the unmarked city sedan park at the curb. Out stepped 3 officials in matching khaki shirts and sensible shoes, each holding a clipboard and water bottle. Their arrival, quiet and efficient, carried the gravity of real authority, something even HOA presidents couldn't outvote. Mia leaned out the screen door, fanning herself with a folded printout. "They're early. Funny how clean things get when someone else does the measuring," Walt muttered. Carla, across the street, had been raking her front lawn for nearly an hour. Her flower beds were perfectly edged, mulch refluffed, porch swept twice. Now she froze mid-motion, gripping the rake like a prop she'd suddenly forgotten how to use. The inspectors approached Walt's property first. Maya, the city clerk from earlier, greeted him with a warm smile and firm handshake. "Mr. Jennings. Let's begin." They moved with calm professionalism, taking photos of the driveway, measuring distances from the curb, marking lot boundaries with small orange flags. Walt handed over a neatly labeled folder containing zoning maps, a copy of the deed, and the application package. Neighbors started to drift from their porches and driveways, forming quiet semicircles under pop-up canopies. Someone passed around folding fans printed with old election slogans. Mrs. Bell carried a jug of iced water and offered it to whoever would accept. Gerald passed out reusable cups and muttered updates to latecomers like a sportscaster calling a slow but promising game. Carla crossed the street. She wore a cream blouse, crisp slacks, and a brittle smile. "This inspection is out of step with HOA authority," she said loudly. "We were not consulted." Maya glanced up calmly. "It's a city matter, ma'am. We're here regarding Mr. Jennings's application, not HOA operations." "But he's destabilizing the neighborhood," Carla pressed, louder now. "This is a private community. Rules exist for a reason. Driveway designation affects property value, foot traffic, precedent." "It's a zoning request," Maya replied evenly. "Standard procedure." Walt said nothing. He stood with his hands behind his back, gaze steady. From the fringe of the gathering, Elias stepped forward. "Actually," he said, voice soft but carrying, "the HOA hasn't exactly followed standard procedure themselves." Carla stiffened. "Elias." He faced the inspectors, not his mother. "Our board hasn't reviewed a single expenditure since February. I know because I helped compile the packets. And last month, 6 steak dinners were charged to HOA funds. Same restaurant. No agenda listed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jenny gripped Paul's arm. Mr. Tate raised an eyebrow without speaking. Even Mrs. Bell paused mid-pour. Walt handed Maya another document from his folder. This is a formal request for financial review, supported by 15 homeowners. Submitted 3 days ago. We haven't received a reply. Maya took it, glanced it over, and tucked it neatly into her clipboard. Carla's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands flexed at her sides. This is a smear campaign, she said, voice brittle. My family, my reputation. It's just paperwork, Walt said quietly. Carla turned on her heel and stormed back toward her house. On the way, her foot struck something near the walkway. A small ceramic gnome, slightly chipped, tumbled sideways and rolled into the grass. She hissed under her breath and kept walking. From behind her fan, Mrs. Bell leaned toward Mia and said with dry delight, "That's twice they've tried to ban those things." Carla's 14-paragraph rant floods the HOA Facebook page at dawn, concluding with, "We must protect this community from internal subversion." The post went live at 6:07 a.m., complete with overcapitalized headers, vague accusations, and a gif of a waving American flag. It accused unnamed residents of attempting to undermine suburban stability and hinted at unauthorized alliances with city officials. It referenced bylaws, but none with specific numbers. By 6:45 a.m., the comment thread was already stacked with confused questions, a few concerned likes, and, most notably, several laughing face emojis. Mia stood in the kitchen in her robe, scrolling through the post on her phone as the coffee pot gurgled. You'd think she was uncovering a sleeper cell, she muttered. Walt, already dressed and spreading butter on toast, didn't look up. Sometimes the loudest one in the room is the one losing control. By mid-morning, Carla had posted 3 follow-ups. One was an oddly formal letter with multiple fonts, the second, a blurry photo of Walt's driveway with a red circle drawn around a lawn chair. The third was a meme of a cracked dam labeled Community Standards, with the caption 1 week link. Walt printed them all. Documentation, he said simply. He placed them into a folder labeled HOA, Unofficial Communications. At Mia's suggestion, he delivered a copy to Maya at City Planning, who accepted it with a polite nod and a hint of amusement. Flyers began appearing on mailboxes that afternoon, clearly rushed and hastily printed. They read, "Stand strong with HOA tradition, support order, not chaos," but tradition was misspelled on half of them, and the clip art flag had been inserted upside down. Several neighbors quietly peeled them off and replaced them with handwritten notes that said things like, "I support my neighbors," or simply, "Enough." That evening, Walt's living room filled with familiar faces. Mr. Tate unfolded his usual clipboard. Jenny and Paul brought banana bread. Mrs. Bell wore a t-shirt that read, "Make peace, not pink slips." They sat around the coffee table with Mia typing furiously and Elias standing in the corner, holding a flash drive. "I pulled the full spending reports," Elias said. "She never thought I'd check timestamps, but here they are." He plugged it into Mia's laptop, and the screen lit up with color-coded expense reports. Steak dinners. Duplicate charges for flower arrangements. A monthly consulting fee to Diane, Carla's friend, with no attached scope of work. "This is enough to raise flags," Mr. Tate said. "Or vote," Mrs. Bell added softly. They drafted a formal motion of no confidence under Bylaw 6.2. Mia formatted the document. Walt read it aloud once, then twice, as neighbors signed one by one. The community center buzzed that night. Folding chairs scraped across linoleum. Fans spun lazily overhead. Carla stood at the front, flanked by Diane and Mr. Dorsey, the vice president, an older man with a weary expression and a striped tie that looked borrowed. Carla opened the meeting with barely concealed strain. Her voice wavered on keywords like standards and integrity. She clutched a thick stack of papers, occasionally waving them without context. "We are under threat," she said. "Threat from those who seek to bend rules for their benefit." Mia handed printed ballots to neighbors in the back. The top read, "Maple Loop HOA, recall vote." Walt watched as they moved from hand to hand. Mr. Dorsey cleared his throat. Quorum is present. If there is a motion on the floor, we will recognize it. Silence stretched. Then Mrs. Bell rose slowly. She stood tall, voice clear as a bell. I move for an emergency recall vote of the current HOA board under Bylaw 6.2. Gasps. Murmurs. The shuffling of programs and feet. Carla stared at her, stunned. Hands begin rising. First timid, then quickly, as nearly the whole room joins in. On the 4th of July, Walt wakes up to the sound of children decorating his new Jennings Wake sign with red, white, blue streamers. The laughter floated in through the open window like music from a better time. Walt blinked, pulled on his slippers, and shuffled to the front porch, rubbing sleep from his eyes. 3 kids, one on tiptoes, were carefully taping miniature flags around the post where the city had unofficially approved the temporary street sign. Jennings Way, public access was hand-painted in bold navy letters, the J just slightly crooked. Across the street, folding chairs were already unfolding. Smoke curled from the first barbecue grill of the day. Bunting draped from porches like celebratory garlands. Even the mailbox that had once earned Walt a citation had a ribbon tied to its handle. On the porch table, a small box sat beside his coffee mug. Mia padded out behind him, barefoot and grinning. Open it, she said. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a laminated pink slip. The citation for unauthorized overnight parking, Section 4.2.1. Underneath, in Mia's neat handwriting, souvenir from the Revolution. Walt chuckled, deep and low. You know I'm framing this, right? Already got the mat picked out, she replied. The day rolled on like a hymn. Jenny and Paul manned the lemonade stand. Mrs. Bell passed out mini flag cakes wrapped in wax paper. An Elvis impersonator in a glittering red jumpsuit crooned, "Can't Help Falling in Love" from a makeshift plywood stage on Gerald's lawn. Someone set up a cornhole game. Someone else filled a cooler with root beer bottles and one lonely can of hard cider. Dogs trotted past in bow ties. Elias sat under the shade of an oak, passing Mia notes from his laptop. We need a tech policy, he murmured, half apologetic. No more PDFs from 2006. Mia raised an eyebrow. Did Carla ever use anything newer? Probably still on Windows Vista, he said. Walt made the rounds. He shook hands with neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years. Mr. Dorsey nodded at him from behind a stack of paperwork, a badge reading "Acting President" clipped awkwardly to his shirt pocket. We're proposing some updates, Dorsey said. Citizenship review clause, transparency reporting, proper budget oversight. Walt smiled. And the gnomes? Dorsey gave a slight grin. They stay. Later, as the sun slipped low and sparklers cracked in quiet bursts on the sidewalk, Walt sat on his porch sipping iced tea. Elias joined him with 2 glasses of lemonade. I mean it, Walt said quietly. You stopped a bad thing early. That matters. Elias gave a sheepish shrug. I just wanted to see the gnomes stay. Out near the edge of the sidewalk, Mia raised a camera. Walt walked to the center of the lawn with a new sign in hand, this one varnished, clean, proudly cut by Mr. Tate in his garage. He drove the stake into the grass slowly, firmly, and stepped back to reveal the painted message. Public access, driveway of the people. Applause broke out, scattered but genuine. Even Mr. Clemens, the old Navy man with the cane, raised his glass of store-brand ginger ale and called out, to standing up, even after 60. Walt gave a small bow. Fireflies blinked in the hedges as the first fireworks popped behind distant treetops. The evening thickened with grill smoke and laughter. He eased back into his chair, Mia beside him, feet up, the laminated citation catching a bit of porch light. He took a slow sip and smiled to himself. Funny thing about rules, sometimes they only work when you break them the right way. On a street once ruled by silence and pink paper slips, neighbors found their voices over sweet tea and sidewalk chalk. What began as one man's quiet stand became a ripple, turning suspicion into unity, frustration into reform. It wasn't about breaking rules, but about reminding those who enforce them that power, unchecked, forgets its purpose. When communities come together, even the most rigid systems must learn to bend. Maybe it's not just about driveways or bylaws, but about remembering who we share the block with, and why that matters.